Maybe. Yeah. Welcome to the AI show. I'm Scott Stevenson, co-founder of Deepgram. With me is Jeff Ward, aka Susan. He's a Navy pilot, acclaimed dad joke writer, and AI scientist at Deepgram.
Hi, all.
On the AI show, we talk about all things AI. What is it? What can you do with it? How does it affect you? Where is it going? We're live and ready to answer your questions. Comment on YouTube and Twitch or tweet at Deepgram AI to join in. Today, we're asking the question, should AI be regulated?
Oh man, this is a big one.
Yeah. There's some recent news.
Yeah. There's some big. Basically, government has figured out that AI exists.
Like, whoa, wait a minute.
Right.
This is important stuff.
Yeah. It's like maybe the world can change and all sorts of things can happen.
Yeah.
And that means we're going to regulate it.
Yeah.
You know, let's just cut to the
tax
chase.
it, regulate it.
Should it be that, it's going to be?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So really the question is, how's it going to be? And what does it take to do that? I mean, like, how do you even define something from a legal standpoint?
Of what is AI?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty rough one. You can start with technology, right? Anything that is made from a computer.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, we've struggled with this question multiple times on the show. Like, how do you define this versus that? You go, to the internets and the wikis, and suddenly there's 8 different, definitions for one set of tools. And over time, these things blend together so seamlessly that you don't even realize where AI begins and other things, began. And it's a big challenge.
Yep. And I don't know. It's a big problem.
Yeah. So first, can we define it in a legal, well pinned down way that will be durable? So 5-10 years from now, this legal definition of AI can be used to then say this needs to be regulated in these different ways.
Probably not in any good way.
Yeah, I can't imagine a good way.
No. You set something down now. It seems all right. What are you going to do? Anything that looks smart? No, they're not going to do that. Anything that uses GPUs? Okay, probably not. Anything that software that gets better over time, gets better with exposure to data. What kind of definitions are you going to come up with?
Will curve fitting in Excel suddenly be controlled?
Yeah. Curve fitting. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, seriously.
Fit a curve in Excel, now.
Wait
a minute.
Linear regression on those points there.
Yep.
So that's a huge challenge. And I think that just the beginning is fraught with danger there.
I think there's no way that this could be regulated well, basically. Like you can regulate it, and maybe government will because of hype and things like that, but it's probably a mistake.
Well, I'm going to take a slightly contrary view. Some regulations have helped in the past industries, but
like what?
Like what?
Like banking.
No,
that's true.
Yeah, no.
Helps in banking.
Basically, when it comes down to, say, protecting consumers or something along those lines, there are examples where the regulations have helped. But this is a really big challenge here because, first of all, the regulations that are starting to come out are talking about like export laws, export controls because of AI being weaponized. That's not really talking about consumer protections here. That's going to be really, really hard to find something beneficial for the average person coming out of regulations like that. But, the right legislation can also help increase an industry. Like, so if you're a company X and regulations are coming, but you don't know what they're going to be, when they finally set down, then at least the playing field, right? So long as they're not too damaging, you can now step in, understanding there's a safety net of here's my boundary, don't go past this, and I can build inside this niche. Now, the problem is, like we've already started talking about, like, can you build those boundaries in any meaningful way?
Yeah, the meaningful way, the real part of this. Okay, yeah, there will be regulations of some type, right? But like there are lenient regulations and then there are like real regulations, right? Where you have to do things this way and comply that way, et cetera. Otherwise, and when you start to do that, the U.S. was in a more unique position in the past in other similar revolutions. We we were the leaders and we were the ones that had the resources to go after things like, in the later part of the Industrial Revolution, in the tech revolution, we didn't have to worry so much about other players. That's not true anymore. China is a powerhouse. They have a huge population. They have their own economy. They don't have to rely on the U.S., at least from a tech perspective. They've got their own Twitter, their own Facebook, their own whatever. And you could be like, oh, well, they're all copies of the U.S. Well, it doesn't matter. The huge economy there, right? And they have tons of people, and data flows freely, and models and algorithms flow freely. And they're a population that's 4 times the size of the U.S. And now they're waking up, too. Their middle class is only going to get bigger. In the U.S., we're pretty stagnant. And so when you say, hey, we're going to start throwing the ratchet straps on everything and tie it down and everything, nothing can leave the U.S., well, that's fine, except no money will be left in the U.S. in order to develop AI. Not none, just less. And data won't be free to train the algorithms. Meanwhile, in China, data's flowing freely, money's flowing freely, and their economy is bolstered massively. And we're here saying, like, we're the future Europe.
Well, it's definitely a challenge because, like you said, the good example is they have their Twitters, they have their Facebooks, but they're fairly blatant copies in some ways.
But they work.
Yeah, and the example, that's exactly the point. They don't have the controls that say you're not allowed to really do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we start, throwing down the screws, we stop getting the benefits of seeing the results of their research and incorporating that in and getting that cross-pollination. So I do think that we could do real harm here and quickly get behind.
Yeah.
If we put on brakes that are kind of meaningless. I mean, say arms controls, you can stop physical pieces from leaving the country. Some of the things that it takes to build, big weapon systems just can't be easily reproduced in another country. Therefore, it's a physical thing. Arms controls kind of make sense. But when it comes to, machine learning and all that stuff, you can be an 18-year-old, kid in your basement with a computer and come up with some great, crazy new model tweak that rivals what others are doing. It's becoming a little bit harder. I'm not saying it's that easy.
Yeah. Well, you could always do this with software, though.
Yeah.
Right? Do we regulate software?
Yeah. We do some. How well does it work?
Yeah.
The challenge here is that regulating something where the people you're trying to stop are already kind of on parity with us.
Yeah.
And they're going to continue on.
Yeah.
That just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, but okay, regulations are coming, right?
Yeah, they're coming.
Fine.
How do you deal with it?
Are they going to go with some technological definition, or are they going to say maybe for civilian use, you can do whatever you want, but for military use you can't? Or like, how are they going to draw up the lines here?
So there's there's a request or not a notice talking about regulation coming, and inside of there, they're discussing, how to possibly define it. And then part of the comments is how should we define this and all that stuff. But in there, it doesn't really break down military or civilian. And you got to think, a lot of the civilian stuff could easily be used for military stuff. Think about drones. Hey, I want to build a drone that does a whole lot of image recognition stuff. I want to build that farm drone I've always thought about, right? Well, that exact same technology could obviously easily be used for military purposes. So you can't just say, oh, if it's civilian, go for it, because you can flip that switch and in 10 seconds have turned it over to military. So these regulations are not going to try to, not going to be easily split between civilian and military uses there. So that's a huge challenge.
But what are they going to regulate? The code? Like, don't open source AI anymore.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. But there's also, a lot of different things that regulation can touch. So, how they're going to do it, this is to me a huge, big question for the future. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
I don't personally see an easy solution here, but I can see like the intents are, of course, military export, import export on military weapons, But not only that, but think about biomedical research and applications and hospitals and stuff like that. Those regulations are definitely going to happen. Maybe autonomous vehicles. Here's a set of standard data sets that you must pass. Your machine learning algorithms must pass to be able to be considered a drivable vehicle in California.
Yep.
Those types of regulations, those types of acts are clearly coming, and probably are warranted. I can easily see the standard data sets from the government being a form of regulation, or being a form of control on these things for specific applications. But saying this piece of code, because it was built using some function in the toolkit of X, that's you can't ship it across the internet.
Yeah.
I just, those types of things are really hard to even understand how that could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the closest thing I can think of that has like real export restrictions on it are FPGAs. And there are really fancy FPGAs in the world that still have export restrictions on them from the US. They're created in the US. It's a lot like a processor, almost as fast as a processor, but it performs kind of like an ASIC, an application-specific integrated circuit. But it's a programmable processor, if that makes any sense. It's a field programmable gate array, so you can physically manipulate the gates on a and they're very small gates, and there are millions of them. But you can physically manipulate them with electric fields, and you can't ship those out of the country if they're above a certain performance level, essentially. So the companies that make these, like Xilinx, can't ship out their high-end stuff to like China, basically. And but that's a physical object, right? That's hard to produce. That is done with tooling, that would be very hard to replicate somewhere else. Code is a different story,
But even on the FPGA front, like, honestly, that seems like a technology that should be a lot more prevalent. And I can only imagine that saying above a performance level has really squashed the industry. Because why try to go for that performance level if you know that you don't have a worldwide distribution for it?
Yeah.
Or in that you have to go through all sorts of different regulatory hurdles. Just to even ship it within the US, you're going to have to do stuff. So it probably has had a chilling effect. It's not my area, so I can't say for certain, but it just seems like there's some areas there. Another one that's pretty relevant is cryptography. That one's right in the wheelhouse here of being, software. And there's a long history of cryptography going all around the world. It really has not been stopped, but, having limits on like bit sizes of keys and things like that. And, it's just kind of ridiculous. It's like, oh, this program's okay so long as you can't increase this one counter above this level. It's like, really? You really think that stopped its use elsewhere?
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. How are they going to identify it? How are we going? What are we going to do for it? What industries, what areas is going to affect?
Well, we've talked about the export side of it. What about the import side? When we regulate to the point where we can't actually beat others and they have the good stuff, will we be able to import the good stuff?
Ooh, well, here's another question. Just like there's data havens, they're starting to pop up for GDPR, stuff like that. Will we have, machine learning havens? Will your, Amazon put the core guts of Alexa in China?
Yeah.
Because they can really rip you apart there.
Yeah.
Because they were able to train and do stuff they can't do here, or vice versa.
Probably.
Well, again, that's
I think
huge speculation, craziness.
I think at the end of the day, regulation, data privacy, these things matter, and you shouldn't abuse them. But people do want a better life. They do want more productivity. They do want good products. And a way to get there is with data, training on it, building a smart system. And the way that we used to do that is we just have humans do it. That's really expensive, and they can only do so much, essentially. And now it's like, hey, we have the opportunity to have machines do things that humans could do, maybe at 100x the productivity, and we're worried about it, you know. And it's like, okay, well, you should be worried about it, but also you should think about the productivity gains that you're squashing by that, and saying like, hey, more people could be fed, more people can have better health care, you know, when you let this ride for a few decades and just bring up the rising tide lifts all boats here, you know, everything becomes more productive. Of course, it'll only be the very developed, you know, the pretty developed countries that are benefiting from it in the beginning, but, you know, that stuff does normalize across the world, just like mobile phones.
Oh, yeah, there's that's the hope. You know, the reality.
Well, it takes time though. It might not even be in our lifetime, you know. It might be over the next 50 years, like, hey, there are AI powerhouses, but you know, the stuff relaxes. It isn't like a steam, you can't find a steam engine anywhere, right? Okay, it's 200 years later, everything's fine, right? So, but yeah, there are other better things. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, well, in general, we've got what's been happening more and more and faster. I'm not going to go to the Kurzweil stuff here.
Oh, no.
But society's struggling to catch up with technology. You know, technology used to move basically at this pace of society. You know, as a new thing came along, we were sort of integrating it into our laws.
You didn't have to change yourself very much in your lifetime.
Well, you know, the social norms would adapt to that one new thing. It would take a little bit while and go. And now there's a new thing and a new thing and a new thing and a new thing, and we're still trying to catch up with the fact that you can call someone anywhere in the world, you know, for basically nothing. You know, we're still catching up with technology that came out in the 80s and 90s, and finding regulations and, you know, ways of integrating the social implications of those things into us. So this is just another one that's just so massive, and it's changing so fast.
Yep.
You know, going back to the definition problem, you know, defining what is AI, what is not, you know, what you can and can't do with it. Just skip ahead to, you know, 10 years from now, and the speech model that's been training off of, you know, X million hours worth of data, and it's perfect and amazing, but it's no longer tagged to that data. It's just, you know, 100 megs worth of weights or something like that. Can you transfer that 100 megs worth of speech, you know, weights, but you can't touch the data?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, separating those two now, you've got the knowledge store that represents an entire huge thing.
It represents experience.
It represents experience.
But the experience is stored in the model weights.
Yeah. So that represents an entire huge data cache in a lot of ways, you know.
Yeah.
These types of ideas of something that is small that can represent this huge thing. It's like saying I've got my core engineer at a company, and you've stolen them and moved them somewhere else. If you take the model weights, that kind of thing, like equating people to.
But they're replicable. They're clonable.
They're
instantly.
And clonable.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean, which I think is actually a really interesting thing. This is going to have to be figured out in the legal landscape.
Oh, yeah.
It touches on regulation, but you have a new being in some sense of the word that now has a bunch of experience that is now useful, and you can pump electricity into it and it does stuff, right? That can be infinitely replicated and, you know, sent somewhere else and run on other hardware. But just as you said, it's not taking the data with it anymore. It's just taking its experience. Well, hey, we already have that. It's called humans. You know, when they go get a job somewhere, they work and they do things. Can they reveal specific data that was in that company that they shouldn't or something? They could, but they're not going to, right? Like, it's hard to remember it. Like, you're going through lines and lines of Excel data or whatever. You don't remember it. You remember the basic stuff. You remember the platonic truths of what you were working on there. But you know what you do when you get hired somewhere else? You're taking all of those learnings and you're using them somewhere else, right? It's a very, very similar thing. You're transporting this around, you know, and hey, you can learn from something over here too. And then you can go take a new job and learn from something over here. And that's the trajectory of your life. What is that? This is like a gray area for sure.
Yeah. What if someone steals that from your company? Is it, you know, is it worth the storage
is it
cost
kidnapping?
of 100 megs, or is it worth billions of dollars?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, we like I said, we've been talking about, you know, regulations and stuff, but the legal aspects of what these new entities are is clearly a broad, wide open thing. You know, stealing all the code behind something is one thing, but stealing the model that took I don't know how many GPU hours and how much data to build. Yeah. That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And the world is changing. The world is getting a lot smaller. One thing that's true though is, communication can happen roughly instantly now, right? You can talk and see anybody anywhere in the world for the most part. You can't just go anywhere else in the world instantly. That holds things back a little bit. Yeah. That holds things back a little bit right now where if you want to go tell your friend we're in San Francisco in New Zealand, something, or show up to their wedding or whatever, it's not going to be 2 seconds later and you're there, right? And so that actually keeps some of the variance in the world still, meaning there are still cultures, there are still local, there's still
geography
local,
still matters.
Yeah, geography still matters and things like that. So I don't come at this from the fact that, well, the world is all the same. Hey, everybody's evolving to the point all of our cultures will just become one. I don't think that's extremely true, but I think that is, for the mean, is pretty true. But there are things that still stick around, and this is just another step toward that. Essentially, everybody becomes more, or not everybody, but all of the different cultures become more productive. They have better health. They have more free time. They have things like that, and everybody's lifted up by that. But they're not going to be identical, mostly because of the geographical differences there. Like, it's hard to move.
That's one of the few things helping to slow down stuff is geography. Right?
Well, and this is what regulation is kind of getting into, is saying like, hey, moving one thing from this place to there, because we're us and you're them, and there's a real geographical difference between us. So that's actually going to persist. There won't probably in the next 100 years there won't be just like one country, right?
Yeah, it won't be every single sci-fi will have what is the generic sci-fi name for the one world government that comes up in all the sci-fi stories.
Yeah.
But
what, the Empire?
No, that's generally 1,000 years. Like when you read sci-fi books, it turns into an empire like 1,000 years afterwards. And the near term, most sci-fi says one world government within generic 50 years in the future.
Oh, okay,
right?
Yeah.
But really where we're heading is like most things, we're going to need some test cases in life to help us, clarify these things. Part of one example that's been recent is, of course, Google search in China. This is, clearly touching on the areas that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
That's kind of a test case for how we are reacting. There's a big social and company, anti-movement for that, right? And will we start building more and more legislation that says, hey, Google, you can't bring your search technology into China for reason X, Y, and Z, or if you do, you have to do it under these conditions. I mean, that's actually a great example where the problem was that they were bending to another country's law, what they wanted to do, as opposed to opening up the full reign of what they could do. They were limiting themselves, but those types of test cases are going to happen. Right.
Yep.
They're probably already happening. We just aren't aware of many of them, and we'll see them in the news pop up, day after day, and it'll reach a certain momentum, and we'll find certain small key things that can help us, improve them the next time they happen. The real challenge, though, is will we go too big too early? And I think we both agreed doing big rash things right now would probably be more harmful than helpful.
You probably want to go the soft direction versus the hard direction, like United Nations or something like that, rather than like hard laws where like put people in jail type kind of thing.
Yeah, well, especially when it's going to be fairly arbitrary, whatever definition you come up with, suddenly just the fact that you have speech recognition in your app makes it your app is now not allowed to be exported. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
That would be a huge challenge, and especially since it's being integrated in so many areas.
Yeah. What are the benefits of regulation?
Well, like I said before, the benefits are it can stabilize a market, right? It can give stability to companies.
Like, hey, this new thing is here. What should we do as a company? What should we plan for? What should we?
Yeah, you know your boundaries, right? You can work within boundaries, right? That is a benefit because it reduces risk, right?
Yeah.
You now know that if you stay within here, you're not going to be arbitrarily smacked.
Yep.
Benefits, again, we talked about the consumer side of the house. Good consumer protections, well-crafted consumer protections can be, hugely beneficial to consumers and also to companies. It keeps everybody on a sane playing field when they have to keep consumers first to a certain degree.
Safe play area. It's a lot like children, like stay on your block. Hey, you can do a lot of things in this area, but, don't set things on fire. Don't stick forks into electrical outlets. Don't cross the road.
But like we talked about, even going down those routes, the fact that you start putting those things into place, you're pigeonholing down, and you really run the risk of saying, naming something is a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
Right. As soon as you've named a thing and said that something else is that name, nothing is a perfect fit.
Yeah.
And especially in this industry that's changing so quickly, so much every single day.
Well, it's also hard to deregulate. That's not usually a thing that happens. Regulations come in, and then 500 times more work goes into getting rid of them.
Oh yeah, it's far easier to say, well, I'll just leave it in place and we'll add more to things.
Yeah.
So, man, it's a sticky wicket, right?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think? What do you think would be should there be punishments, and what would the punishments be?
Oh, punishments.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. Well,
is it just monetary?
This is the whole self-driving car dilemma, right? Yeah. Should you hold car company X liable for the one death a year they cause?
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you treat a company like an individual? I mean, since corporations are now individuals, right? Does that mean you can execute a company if they, maliciously killed someone on the road?
Yeah.
Can you put them in jail?
Yeah.
I know that's another thing. Again, going back to the regulation route, once you define and standardize and you put those clear lines in place, companies like car companies potentially can get into the self-driving, world with a lot more clarity about, what's going to happen to them. I can almost guarantee you that if we had a very clear, consistent standard applied to, the laws or the damages and stuff that will happen when a collision happens, even if they're a little bit, quote unquote, mean to the car companies, that would allow a lot more people to enter the market, a lot more companies to enter the market, because they now have a known risk as opposed to an unknown risk, which is a lot worse, right? So what should happen? Oh, man, it's the scenarios like, what should happen if you design something that's used to kill people?
Yep.
I don't know. Gun manufacturers probably have a lot to think about on this too. Like that's an example of an industry that doesn't have a lot of the repercussions, but there are a lot of other industries that do. I mean, if you make a toy, that chokes one child, you've got huge damages they're going.
Well, it's like a ski resort versus a playground. Like everything in a playground is has to be, so you can't hurt yourself. But ski resort's fine. Yeah, just send kids down. They can run into trees, like whatever. Yeah, right. It's just history and how people work and what their norms are is just weird.
Yeah, and it comes down to a test case hit. Ski resorts versus manufacturer X versus whatever.
Yep.
And when that test case hit, we were forced to make a decision.
Yep.
And that decision is stuck.
Yep.
Right. And even if technology and time has changed, that decision still stands.
Yeah.
Like Kinder eggs.
Yep.
Good example. You can't import Kinder eggs because a kid may choke on them.
Yep. Kinder eggs are chocolate with a toy inside, and a little egg shape. And in the U.S., you can't get them.
Yeah, I know. And my son loved them when we were living overseas.
Yep.
Yep.
And because if a child eats it and chokes on it, then
except for getting something this big, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, but yeah, that's the idea.
So where do you think we'll be 20 years from now? Will these
Well, I think there's a decision point here. You know, if you want the U.S. to truly just become China's vacation spot, it's the new Europe. You know, there isn't really anything going on here. Everybody just kind of chills out and coasts for the rest of their lives. Then you regulate a whole bunch, and you keep your lifestyle the way it is, and that's that. If you still want to be the dominant world power in the world, you can't go hard on regulation in AI or software or whatever. You can't start protecting. You can't go into protect mode.
That's definitely true. You know, if you crack down on innovation, you're gonna kill this industry.
Yep.
You know, we're already seeing. You know, obviously China's been the example, but you know, my time in Scotland, you know, there was a lot of push to get innovators to stay. You know, we're seeing other areas, other regions of the world that are doing a lot more than, you know, the U.S. to encourage things. You know, when I first came to the Bay Area as a good example, people were coming to the Bay Area because that's where all the ideas were at, and that's where everybody wanted to be, and there was this huge, like, you know, upwelling of this is where it's going to be at. Yeah. And now it's still there, but there's a lot more people that are saying, like, I'm here because of the momentum.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, go to say Edinburgh, and there's a lot momentum. Programs that are building that momentum.
It's upstart. Yeah. Right? It is going.
We're going there because
it is starting now.
There's a lot of press to make this stuff happen, and they're building what we are now kind of coasting on.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that's it for today's show. Thanks for joining us on the AI show. What questions do you have about AI? Comment on YouTube or Twitch, or tweet us at Deepgram AI. We're Scott and Susan from Deepgram.
Certainly not robots.
And we come in peace. See you next time.
Are we done? Oh, wait. We got to finish this off. Oh.
2, 1, yeah. 3, 2.